At 5:17 in the morning, local time, the Strait of Hormuz was already awake. The water was crowded, tense, and unforgiving. Tankers moved through narrow lanes. Fishing boats crossed at awkward angles. Merchant ships pushed forward under the pale light of sunrise. And in the middle of it all, a United States aircraft carrier was cutting through one of the most closely watched waterways on the planet. Deep inside the Combat Information Center, far away from the open air and the noise of the sea, a sonar technician leaned closer to his screen. Something had appeared beneath the carrier's starboard side. It was faint at first, almost easy to miss. A small return on the display, holding close under the hull. It did not look like a fish, it did not behave like loose debris, it was not drifting with the current, and it was not being pushed away by the movement of the ship. It was staying there. For 3 seconds, no one said a word. The technician replayed the last 30 seconds of acoustic data. The mark remained in the same place. It did not roll away, it did not slide back, it did not fade like background noise. It stayed fixed against the carrier's hull as if it belonged there. But it did not belong there. He pressed his microphone. CIC sonar. We have an unusual contact under starboard hull section 4. Appears fixed. The watch officer turned immediately. Say again. Contact appears fixed to the hull. That one sentence changed the entire ship. There was no loud announcement across the flight deck, no sudden rush of people through the passageways, no dramatic moment for the sailors above to see. But inside the command spaces, the atmosphere hardened instantly. Within seconds, the captain was on the bridge. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. Hold course, hold speed, no sudden maneuvering. The order moved through the ship with quiet precision. On the surface, the carrier continued forward, steady and controlled. 100,000 tons of American steel moved through the Strait of Hormuz, surrounded by civilian traffic, narrow water, and the invisible pressure of a region where a single mistake could shift the entire day. Less than 1 nautical mile off the carrier's starboard quarter, an Iranian oil tanker was beginning to pull away. On AIS, it had identified itself as a commercial crude carrier. On radar, it had followed a slow crossing pattern. On the radio, it had answered nothing. And 5 minutes earlier, it had passed close enough to the carrier's starboard side to make every surface warfare officer in the strike group uncomfortable. At first, it looked like another unsafe transit. Aggressive, careless, maybe deliberate, but still inside that gray area where tension exists without becoming open confrontation. Then the long-range camera footage came back. The image was grainy but clear enough. As the tanker moved parallel to the carrier, a panel near its stern appeared to open. Not wide, not for long, just a dark rectangular gap in the steel, visible for a few seconds above the waterline. Then it closed. No crew member appeared. No cargo operation was underway. No maintenance made sense in that location, at that moment, at that distance from an American carrier. Inside CIC, the replay froze on the frame. The room went quiet again. The captain looked at the frozen image. Then he looked at the sonar plot. Get EOD moving aboard the nearest Arleigh Burke-class destroyer. The response came immediately. Navy EOD specialists were pulled from standby. A rigid hull inflatable boat was prepared at the rail. Cameras were checked. Dive gear hit the deck. Security teams moved into position. This was no longer routine. The carrier shifted into a controlled defensive posture. Condition 3 was set quietly across key stations. Damage control teams moved toward lower compartments. Watertight doors were checked. Medical teams stood by without asking questions. On the flight deck, operations slowed just enough to reduce vibration. Aircraft handlers stepped back from active movement zones. Engines stayed cold. Catapults remained idle. No one said the most alarming words over an open channel, but everyone who needed to understand understood. If the object was harmless, the Navy would remove it. If it was not harmless, then the wrong movement could turn the carrier's own size and motion against her. The Iranian tanker was now increasing speed, 20 knots, then 23. Its course bent toward heavier commercial traffic where dozens of civilian vessels cluttered the radar picture. The destroyer on the carrier's starboard screen changed heading to intercept. Bridge to bridge hail now. The first call went out in English. Iranian tanker, this is United States Navy warship. Maintain course and reduce speed immediately. No response. The second call went out on the international distress frequency. Still nothing. The third was transmitted in Farsi. Silence. Above the water, an MH-60R Seahawk lifted from the destroyer's flight deck. Its rotors cut through the humid air as it dropped low over the sea and turned toward the tanker. Under its nose, the infrared camera locked onto the stern. The tanker kept moving. Not drifting, not confused. Moving with purpose. Back beneath the carrier, the sonar contact remained exactly where it had been. Fixed to the hull. The EOD officer aboard the destroyer received the latest feed and studied the shape on the screen. It was too clean to be wreckage, too steady to be marine growth, too deliberately positioned to be coincidence. He looked up from the display. "Tell the carrier we need eyes on it." The message reached CIC at 5:26. The captain stood over the tactical table, watching 3 screens at once, the tanker pulling away, the Seahawk closing in, and the small bright mark clinging beneath his ship. For the first time that morning, the carrier was no longer simply transiting Hormuz. She was caught between movement and danger, move too fast and risk disturbing whatever was under the hull, stay too still, and become the largest target in the strait. The captain keyed the secure circuit. "Lock down the carrier. Nobody makes a hard move until EOD confirms what that is." On the sonar screen, the object did not move. Outside, the Iranian tanker kept running. At 5:28, the tanker was no longer behaving like a normal merchant vessel. Its bow turned east, cutting toward a dense lane of civilian traffic. Oil carriers, container ships, coastal freighters, and dozens of smaller contacts filled the screen like static. That was the problem. In open water, one ship can be tracked, boxed, and controlled. Inside traffic, it can try to disappear into the pattern. Inside the Combat Information Center of the American destroyer, the tanker's track was highlighted in red. It had not crossed the final threshold yet, but its behavior was speaking clearly. No radio response, no AIS discipline, no compliance, and now acceleration. Contact increasing speed, 24 knots. The destroyer's captain stood behind the surface warfare coordinator, eyes locked on the tactical display. "Keep us between the tanker and the carrier," the helm answered at once. "Right full rudder, coming to new course." The destroyer leaned into the turn, cutting across the tanker's projected path. Its radar mast swept the horizon. Its electronic warfare suite listened for emissions. Its forward system remained centered, not aimed, but visible. At sea, posture speaks before force does. The first Seahawk closed on the tanker's stern at low altitude. Its sensor ball rotated beneath the nose, sending live infrared and optical footage back to the destroyer and the carrier strike group. The image came through sharp. Crew on the tanker's aft deck. 3 figures, 1 tarp, one section near the stern hatch still warmer than the surrounding steel. "Possible recent mechanical access," the sensor operator reported. No one answered immediately. They were all watching. The Seahawk slid along the tanker's starboard side, staying outside collision range, close enough to read markings, close enough to record faces. The tanker's bridge windows flashed in the morning light. No flags were visible from that angle. No deck crew waved. No one acknowledged the helicopter. The pilot transmitted on guard frequency. "Iranian tanker, this is United States Navy aircraft. You are operating unsafely in proximity to a U.S. warship. Reduce speed and maintain present heading." Silence. The tanker kept pushing 25 knots. Its wake widened behind it, thick and white, too aggressive for a vessel claiming routine transit. Back aboard the carrier, the situation under the hull was becoming more serious in a different way. The object had not moved. That was the most disturbing part. If it had drifted, it might have been debris. If it had scraped away, it might have been fishing gear or loose metal. But the return stayed fixed against the same section of hull, steady through vibration, current, and the carrier's slow forward motion. The EOD team was now in the water from the escort destroyer. A rigid hull inflatable boat held station in the carrier's shadow, dwarfed by the black wall of steel rising above it. Divers entered one at a time. No wasted motion, no drama, just practice steps in a place where one wrong movement could change everything. Inside the carrier's CIC, the underwater camera feed flickered to life. Dark water, steel surface, bubbles sliding upward. Then the first diver's light found the contact. The image steadied. The room went quiet. The object was not part of the ship. It sat flush against the hull, held there by deliberate contact. Its outline was too regular. Its position was too precise. It had not arrived there by accident. The EOD lead spoke over the secure channel. Device confirmed, not debris. The captain's expression did not change. "Can you identify trigger type?" A pause. "Negative at this time. Recommend no speed change, no hard turn. Minimize hull vibration." The captain looked toward the air operations officer. "Freeze launch cycles." On the flight deck, the order took effect within seconds. Catapults stayed idle. Aircraft preparing for launch were held in place. Deck crews backed away from active movement zones. The ship did not shut down. A carrier never truly shuts down. But it became still in the places that mattered. Outside the formation, the Iranian tanker made its next mistake. It turned off its AIS. On commercial tracking systems, the ship vanished. On U.S. Navy radar, it remained perfectly visible. "Contact has gone dark," the surface warfare coordinator called. The destroyer's captain did not hesitate. "Final warning," the message went out. Iranian tanker, this is United States Navy warship. You are ordered to reduce speed immediately. Failure to comply will be treated as dangerous intent. For 5 seconds, there was only static. Then 10. Then 15. The tanker did not answer. Instead, it turned harder toward the traffic lane. That was the moment the tone changed. The destroyer increased speed, sliding into a blocking position ahead of the tanker's bow. A second escort shifted course to cover the far side. The Seahawk dropped lower, its camera fixed on the stern. Another report came in. EOD has partial visual. Device appears externally placed. No natural attachment. The words moved through the command circuit like a cold current. Externally placed. That meant someone had put it there, and the last ship close enough to do it was now trying to get away. At 5:34, a second underwater contact appeared on sonar. Smaller, fainter, trailing below the carrier's starboard quarter. For a moment, the operators thought it was turbulence from the divers. Then it held shape. The sonar technician zoomed in, adjusted gain, and replayed the return. His voice tightened. CIC sonar, possible second contact in the water. The captain turned slowly toward the display. On the surface, the tanker was still accelerating. Under the hull, one device was confirmed, and now the sea itself was producing another shadow. The captain keyed the secure channel. All escorts, tighten the screen. Boarding team, prepare to move. Then he looked back at the sonar picture. Find out what that second contact is before it finds us. At 5:38, the first EOD diver disappeared beneath the carrier's shadow. From the RHIB, the ship looked impossible. A black wall of steel rising out of the Strait of Hormuz, stretching forward and aft until it swallowed the morning light. Above, thousands of tons of flight decks sat quiet. Below, the water slapped against the hull in slow, heavy rhythms. The diver did not look up. He followed the guideline down. 10 feet, 20, 30. The noise changed underwater. The carrier's machinery became a deep metallic heartbeat. Pumps, turbines, shaft vibration, the dull pressure of a warship trying to stay steady while moving through dangerous water. His helmet camera sent live video back to the destroyer, then to the carrier's combat information center. Inside CIC, no one moved unless they had to. The screen showed bubbles, darkness, then steel. The diver's light swept across the hull. There it was. A rectangular object pressed against the starboard underside, dark against darker metal. Its edges were too clean. Its placement was too careful. It was not hanging loose. It was not tangled. It was attached. The EOD lead kept his voice flat. Visual on primary device. The captain answered from the carrier. Copy. Maintain assessment only. No one asked the diver to remove it yet. That was the discipline. Movies rush toward the dramatic moment. The Navy builds the picture first. The diver moved closer by inches, not feet. His gloved hand never touched the device. His light traced the outer casing, the contact points, and the area around it. A second diver held position behind him, watching the water, watching the hull, watching for anything that did not belong. Above them, the Iranian tanker was still trying to run. On the destroyer's tactical display, its track bent toward the merchant lane. The American destroyer had already moved to block, forcing the tanker to choose between slowing down or risking a dangerous close encounter with a U.S. warship. The tanker chose neither. It held speed. 25 knots, then 26. Contact still non-compliant, the surface warfare coordinator reported. The destroyer's captain watched the closing geometry tighten. Do not let him enter traffic. The Seahawk circled above the tanker's stern, camera locked. The sensor operator zoomed in on the aft deck. 3 crewmen were moving fast now. One dragged a tarp. Another appeared to be clearing something near the rail. The pilot transmitted again. Iranian tanker, reduce speed immediately. You are being recorded. No answer. Then a new call came from the carrier's sonar room. Possible small craft activity bearing 086. Multiple contacts, range 4 nautical miles. On the large display, 3 fast-moving blips appeared east of the formation. Small boats, not close enough to engage, too coordinated to ignore. They were spreading, not approaching in a straight line. One angled north, one held center, one pushed south as if testing the screen. None of them needed to make contact. They only needed to pull attention away at the wrong moment. The strike group adjusted instantly. A second escort shifted radar focus. Another Seahawk was brought to ready status. Lookouts moved to the rails with stabilized optics. The carrier remained steady, locked between the object under her hull and the threat picture expanding around her. This was the trap, not one device, not one tanker. A layered pressure event designed to make the U.S. Navy choose badly. Move the carrier and risk the device. Chase the tanker and expose the carrier. Focus on the small boats and lose the evidence. Inside CIC, the captain stood still. Priorities stay the same. Protect the ship, control the tanker, Track the boats. Underwater, the diver continued his assessment. His camera moved along the hull behind the primary device, following a faint line of disturbed surface residue. Not damage, not corrosion. Something recent. Then his light caught a second shape farther aft, smaller and partly hidden by shadow. The diver froze. The EOD lead saw it at the same time from the feed. Hold position! The second diver shifted angle, bringing another light onto the spot. For 3 seconds, the image blurred with bubbles. Then the shape sharpened. Another object. Not as prominent as the first, but it was there. The EOD lead keyed the secure line. Carrier, EOD, we have possible secondary device. CIC went silent. Every eye turned toward the captain. He did not react outwardly. That was the part sailors remembered later. No panic, no anger. Just a measured pause before the next order. Confirm before classification. Roger, confirming now. On the surface, the tanker suddenly changed behavior. It reduced speed by 2 knots. Not enough to comply, just enough to suggest it knew it was being watched. The destroyer's boarding team was now staged. Body cameras on. Security gear ready but lowered. Boarding ladders secured. The RHIB crew waited for the order while the destroyer held the tanker at an angle that made escape harder with every passing minute. Then the Seahawk called in again. Movement aft deck. Possible object overboard. The camera caught only part of it. A crewman at the stern. A dark shape dropping. A splash. Then the wake swallowed it. The sensor operator marked the coordinates instantly. Object entered water from tanker stern. Timestamp 0543. That changed everything. The destroyer's captain turned to his operations officer. Prepare boarding. Back under the carrier, the EOD diver adjusted position, closing the distance to the second object without touching it. The casing reflected light differently from the hull. Its outline was artificial. Its placement was deliberate. The EOD lad did not overstate it. He did not need to. Secondary device confirmed. The words reached the carrier at 5:46. 2 devices, 1 tanker fleeing. 3 small boats maneuvering outside the screen, and 1 aircraft carrier holding steady in one of the narrowest and most watched waterways on Earth. The captain keyed the shipwide command circuit. Still calm, still controlled. All hands maintain material condition. Damage control team stand by. Flight deck remains frozen. Then he looked at the tactical display, where the tanker was now boxed between American steel and open water. Board that ship. The order went out. Across the strait, the U.S. Navy stopped waiting. At 5:52, the trap was no longer hidden. 2 devices were fixed beneath the carrier's starboard hull. 1 Iranian tanker was trying to break into civilian traffic. 3 small boats were maneuvering beyond the eastern screen. And every second the carrier stayed slow, the strike group became easier to surround, easier to study, easier to pressure. Inside the carrier's combat information center, the tactical picture was divided into layers. Surface contacts, air coverage, underwater threat, boarding status, damage control readiness. No single screen told the whole story. That was the danger. The situation was not built around one decisive move. It was built around overload. Make the carrier hesitate. Make the escort split attention. Make the commanders choose speed over caution. The captain did not take the bait. Keep the carrier steady. Escorts handle the surface picture. EOD owns the hull. Below the waterline, the divers held position near the second device. Their lights moved slowly across the metal surface, careful not to disturb anything. The current pushed against them. The carrier's hull groaned above them, not from damage, but from mass, motion, and pressure. The second device was smaller than the first. That made it worse. The first had been obvious once discovered. The second looked like it had been placed to be missed, tucked farther aft, partially masked by shadow, positioned where turbulence from the hull made visual inspection harder. The EOD lead reported in clipped phrases. Secondary device confirmed. Placement deliberate. Recommend continued no contact assessment. The captain answered immediately. Understood. No removal until isolation plan is complete. On the destroyer, the boarding team launched. The RHIB dropped from the davit and hit the water hard, its engine roaring to life as it cut across the tanker's wake. 6 sailors and attached security personnel moved low inside the boat, helmets on, cameras recording, defensive posture controlled. Every person aboard knew the rule: control the ship without creating the spark that could turn this into something larger. Above them, the Seahawk orbited the tanker's stern, its camera tracking every movement on deck. Then the tanker finally broke radio silence. The transmission came in harsh, distorted, and late. United States warship, this is merchant tanker. We are conducting lawful transit. You are creating unsafe conditions. The destroyer's bridge went still. The captain nodded once to the communications officer. Reply. The response was calm. Iranian tanker, this is United States Navy warship. Reduce speed to 5 knots. Maintain heading. Prepare to be boarded for safety inspection. Static. Then the tanker answered. We refuse unlawful interference. Nobody on the destroyer looked surprised. The tanker's engines remained high. Its wake continued to boil. Its bow angled toward the merchant lane, where civilian ships were already being warned away by U.S. Navy radio traffic. Then, the Seahawk sensor operator saw it. After-deck movement, same location as previous drop. The camera zoomed. A crewman near the stern rail pulled back a dark cover. Another man moved beside him, blocking the view with his body. For 2 seconds, the image was partially obscured. Then something went over the side. Small. Dark. Intentional. Object away, the sensor operator called, marking the splash point. The coordinates were punched into the strike group network instantly. A surface search team tagged the water entry point, another possible device, or evidence, or decoy. The tanker was not just trying to leave, it was trying to erase the story behind it. That single act changed the boarding from inspection to interdiction. The destroyer's captain gave the order. Cut him off! The destroyer increased speed and crossed the tanker's projected track at a hard angle. Not close enough to collide. Close enough to make the tanker's next move obvious. A second escort slid into the far side, closing the lane. The tanker now had only one safe choice. Slow down. For the first time, it did. 26 knots became 22, then 18. Still too fast for boarding. The RHIB curved wide, waiting for the sea state and speed to drop. Nobody wanted a ladder team crushed between 2 steel hulls. Professional restraint does not mean hesitation, it means choosing the exact second when action becomes control. On the carrier, that second had not arrived yet. EOD had finished mapping both devices. Damage control teams had sealed nearby compartments and staged pumps, fire suppression gear, emergency shoring equipment, and medical support. Engineering reduced non-essential vibration. Flight operations remained frozen. The carrier was alive but disciplined. A ship that large cannot disappear, but it can become very hard to panic. At 6:01, the small boats made their move. The center boat accelerated toward the outer escort line. Not directly at the carrier, not directly at the destroyer. A gray zone angle, ambiguous enough to delay a rushed response, aggressive enough to force attention. The escort commander did not wait for uncertainty to grow. The second Seahawk launched. It came in low from the west, nose down, door system visible, searchlight fixed on the lead boat. The helicopter broadcast a warning in English and Farsi. Alter course immediately. You are approaching a U.S. Navy security zone. The boat kept coming for 5 more seconds. Then the destroyer's forward system rotated. Only a few degrees. Enough to be seen. Enough to be understood. The boat slowed, then turned away. The other 2 small craft widened their distance almost immediately. The probe had failed. The screen held. Back at the tanker, the boarding RHIB came alongside. A ladder went up. The first boarding member climbed. No chaos. No shouting. Only boots on wet steel and the sound of a body camera recording the moment. U.S. Navy boarding team, hands visible, move away from the rail. Crewmen froze near the aft deck. One raised his hands, another stepped back toward a hatch. A boarding member moved between him and the door. Stop! Do not move! The bridge team was secured within seconds. The engine room was ordered to reduce speed. The tanker dropped to bare steerage under American observation. At 6:03, the boarding officer reached the stern compartment shown in the earlier footage. The hatch was still warm. Inside, the floor was wet. Tools were scattered. A mechanical panel stood open. The ship's log showed nothing scheduled there. No maintenance, no emergency repair. No reason for that compartment to have been active during the close pass. The boarding officer looked into his camera. Evidence of recent aft access. Possible deployment point. At the same moment, EOD reported from beneath the carrier. Secondary device is real. Both devices stable for now, awaiting neutralization plan. The captain closed his eyes for half a second, then opened them. Prepare controlled emergency response. No one cheered, no one cursed. The Navy had found the trap inside the trap. Now it had to remove it without giving the planners the outcome they wanted. At 6:11, the Iranian tanker was no longer moving freely. Its engines had been brought down to bare steerage. Its bridge was under control. Its crew had been separated, searched, and seated away from critical compartments. Every hatch, every panel, every wet footprint near the stern was being recorded. No speeches, no threats, just evidence. On the aft deck, the boarding officer stood beside the open mechanical compartment seen earlier on the Seahawk feed. The metal was still warm to the touch. Water pooled along the deck plates. A section of railing showed fresh scrape marks, bright silver against older paint. Inside the compartment, the team found no cargo gear, no repair log, and no reason for the hatch to have been opened during a close pass beside a U.S. carrier. The officer keyed his radio. Boarding team to destroyer. Aft deployment area confirmed. Evidence collection underway. Aboard the destroyer, the report was pushed straight to the carrier. Inside the carrier's combat information center, no one celebrated. The tanker was only half the problem. The other half was still attached beneath them. 2 devices. 1 carrier, thousands of sailors, and a narrow waterway where every passing hull pushed pressure through the sea. The EOD lid gave the next update from the water. Primary device mapped, secondary device mapped, both stable at this time. Stable did not mean safe. It only meant nothing had changed yet. The captain stood beside the tactical table, watching the underwater feed. The image was dark, broken by bubbles and the glow of diver lights sliding over steel. The primary device sat against the hull like a black scar. The secondary device remained farther aft, smaller, harder to reach, placed where shadows and turbulence helped conceal it. "Proceed with isolation," the captain ordered. The answer came back immediately. Proceeding. The divers moved with the kind of slowness that only comes from training. No sudden hand movements, no contact without confirmation, no improvisation. Every step passed through the EOD lead, the carrier's damage control center, and the bridge. Above them, the strike group tightened. 1 destroyer held near the disabled tanker. Another watched the small craft that had backed away but not vanished. A cruiser tracked coastal radar activity. 2 Seahawks remained airborne, 1 over the tanker and 1 sweeping the water around the carrier. The carrier itself stayed steady. Flight operations remained frozen, catapults cold, jet engines quiet. Deck crews held clear of heavy movement zones. Below decks, damage control teams waited beside sealed compartments. Pumps ready, shoring timber staged. Emergency lights glowing over watertight doors. Every sailor knew something was wrong. Almost none of them knew exactly what. That was intentional. The Navy does not feed panic. It feeds procedure. At 6:23, the primary device was isolated. The EOD lead reported the words carefully. Primary device no longer presents immediate threat. A breath moved through CIC, but only for a second. The captain looked at the second feed. Move to secondary. The second device was the harder one. The diver had to work farther aft, where the current shifted unpredictably along the carrier's underside. The hull vibration was slightly stronger there. Visibility dropped every time a wave pattern rolled through from passing commercial traffic. On the surface, merchant vessels had been pushed wider by Navy radio warnings. Most complied immediately. A few asked questions, none received details. The U.S. Navy did not need the entire strait to know an aircraft carrier was vulnerable. It only needed the strait to stay out of the way. At 6:31, the boarding team found the tanker's internal camera system. The recorder had been partially wiped, not destroyed, wiped badly. That was worse for the crew. Deleted data leaves traces. Missing minutes can be recovered, mapped, and matched against radar, helicopter footage, and sonar timelines. The tanker's own attempt to erase the event became another mark against it. The boarding officer reviewed the timestamps. The missing window matched the close pass beside the carrier. He transmitted again. Video gap corresponds with deployment window. On the destroyer's bridge, the captain listened without expression. Copy. Secure the recorder. Then came the call from the carrier. EOD working secondary device. Everyone stopped talking. Underwater, the diver's light fixed on the smaller object. Another diver held position behind him, monitoring the hull and the water column. The device sat close to a seam line where shadow broke up its outline. From a distance, it could have passed for a maintenance fitting. Up close, it was wrong. Too new, too clean, too deliberate. The EOD lead spoke once. Begin neutralization. The next minutes stretched. 6:38, 6:41, 6:44. The tanker sat under guard. The small boats drifted farther away. The carrier held steady, a massive target refusing to panic. Inside CIC, the captain watched the feed in silence. Then the diver's hand pulled back. The EOD lead checked the image, waited 2 seconds, and gave the report every person in that room had been waiting to hear. Secondary device no longer presents immediate threat. For the first time in nearly 90 minutes, the carrier was clear. The captain did not smile. He nodded once. Confirm full hull sweep. The divers continued their search because 1 device could be a threat, 2 devices could be a plan, and a plan could include a third. At 6:58, the final report came in. No additional contacts, starboard hull clear. Only then did the captain allow the ship to move back toward normal operations. Resume controlled transit, restore flight deck in stages. Outside, the carrier began to breathe again. Deck crews returned to their stations. Tow tractors moved. Aircraft handlers reset launch positions. A pair of F/A-18 Super Hornets were brought forward, ready and waiting, their canopies flashing under the hard Hormuz sun. At 7:02, the first jet launched. Steam rolled across the deck. The Hornet shot forward, lifted clean off the bow, and climbed into the morning sky. Not as revenge, as control. The Iranian tanker remained under escort. Its crew was detained. Its systems were preserved for investigation. The aft compartment was sealed. The recorder was secured. The splash points were marked for later recovery. Every radio call, every sonar image, every frame from the Seahawk, every second of body camera footage, all of it was now evidence. The strike group continued through Hormuz without open confrontation and without a sailor lost. That was the part the planners had misread. They thought silence meant weakness. They thought restraint meant hesitation. They thought a carrier could be trapped by surprise. But the U.S. Navy answered in the language it speaks best: discipline, control, and overwhelming procedure under pressure. A device under the hull could have turned the strait into a global crisis. Instead, it became a file, a timeline, and a captured ship. So here is the question. If you were the captain of that carrier, with two devices fixed beneath your hull and the ship responsible still trying to escape, what would you do? Would you hold steady and trust the process, or would you respond immediately? Drop your answer in the comments, because out here, the most powerful thing is not always speed, size, or force. Sometimes it is a crew that refuses to blink.